Welcome to Scene, where the art world meets the real world. Every 2 weeks, we sit down with emerging and established artists to offer a genuine glimpse into their lives and minds, all in an authentic and totally straightforward manner. I'm Carrie Scott, your host. And with 2 decades of experience as a curator and art historian, I firmly believe in the transformative power of art, if it's seen. Sometimes the hardest interviews to do are with artists who you really respect or whose work really, really resonates. And this is the case with Charlotte Colbert. I'm worried that this interview isn't the best one I've ever done. And here's why. I have got this major respect for this woman, and her work breaks me. I have no other words for it. It's emotional, it's emotive. It's all about the feminine sublime. It's all about the feminine and sirens and women, and I want it. So sitting with her was hard. I had to try and play it cool, not very good at that, and tried not to completely geek out on all the feminist stuff because I don't want to alienate an audience that should know her work and appreciate it. This woman is light and love, with so much urgency and pain and passion. She's just awesome. And I hope that the interview gives you some insight into how deep her practice is and how important it is. Let me know. A whole little series.
And
again, you have the frame.
Yes, I used to always do that, but this was basically, no, you told me I got it, but that's annoying. Damn. Maybe you've passed it on.
Oh no. And now I'll be done with it forever.
Oh my God.
It's why I prefer photography, which leads me right into starting this properly.
Oh my God.
Which is how we met in the first place, was through your photography. And I still, Charlotte, shit you not, I think about those works, the Store and Away works that you showed me. And I think there's multiple parts to this story.
Oh my God.
Right? Like, I think about them because when you showed them to me, you came into a studio where I was working, and I don't know if I'm going to out the person yet, but we might. And you showed me these works in the pamphlet. I mean, this is how vividly I remember this.
Oh my God.
And I was like, these are exceptional. And they were triptychs, and they had frames built in, and it was this
I can't believe you remember this.
fantasy black and white place. And then I pitched them to the person I was working with because I wanted to show them. And he just was like, I don't get it.
Didn't get it. Oh my God,
They're
that's
boring.
so crazy.
It still kills me though.
Oh my God.
And then I remember when you were showing it to
That's such a
Deli,
story.
I had a chat with her about buying them because I was like, I missed the boat there. And so honestly, in my list of artists I wanted to sit down and talk to, I was like, Charlotte's at the fucking tippy top.
Oh my God, that's so sweet of me.
Well, it's not sweet. It's the truth. And it kills me because, this is
such a funny, because that's so ages ago, but
and
it's so
different.
interesting. Yeah, different and not, I guess. But it was funny how it all started, the photography, because basically, yes, I always had that thing between film and the art practice. And basically, so that's why even those images were very
cinematic,
narrative and cinematic, I guess. I always had that kind of drive. And then I really wanted to get into film. I didn't know anyone or anything how to get into film. I had no idea. So I was a runner, did all that stuff and thought, God, I've got to write stories or I could draw. So I did a couple of animations, one with Bill Nye and all these guys.
Was that before Store and Away?
It was at the same time. Okay. I'd probably done one animation before then. And then basically I was like, God, I need to learn how to write. And so I started writing screenplays and I did an MA as a screenwriter. And I got my first job writing Leave to Remain with Toby Jones and then writing with Olivier Dahan, who did La Vie en Rose, and then loads of stuff in France. But while I was doing that, basically all the sitting down, I've got a bit of ADHD and I was driving me crazy. So I started taking photographs as a kind of way to actualize the imagery, I guess, of the sitting down. So it started with Store and Away and then A Day at Home, which was all about the kind of madness of writing and being in a space and how the space opens up into kind of this, as you say, fantasy scape of the mind it's also like imprisoning, but it's also like freeing, right? Because you'd exist in your own mind and you spend so much time on your own. You're like giving doorknobs names, like, So I guess that kind of started the double practice with the photograph and the writing. And then I would write screenplays for the imagery. And then basically,
like you'd write screenplays for the images you were finding?
Yeah, all that I was making. Yeah, exactly. And then basically like really like a screenplay version. And then I guess I made more and more props and more and more costumes. And then the gallery asked me to show the props as sculptures. So they kind of escaped the frame and then started growing into the world of it. And then, so now I've got this funny double thing where a lot of the objects from the pictures have gone into the world, and I do sculptures and ceramics and installations. And then still the film stuff, which works obviously through screenplays. But it is weird because then the stuff so I made the feature film since, and then the feature film, obviously that whole process also affects the art practice, because then the last show I did for Freeze, it brought in lots of collaborations, which is quite, because I guess that's really from the film world, the idea of like, so there was like a dancer, and I collaborated with a composer and a poetess and a trance playwright, and all sorts of different characters who came in and basically fed the world of the show. And even now, you saw Kate earlier, so I love roping in all these different characters, who you meet along the way and who come in and like feed whatever sort of idea you're trying to explore through a project, I guess.
Do you think you're an artist? Do you call yourself a filmmaker? If you're going to put yourself into a bucket, or do you just say, I make stuff?
Oh my God. I think it's funny because I guess before I used to think of that stuff. And then now I've kind of don't really care that much. Yeah. It's basically because you're living in some kind of organism and you see the world in terms of something that you can reinvent. Then in some ways, you kind of have that approach with a cup or with some clothes or with whatever. You know what I mean? And in some ways, it's still bringing a narrative to an environment. So now I've done like homeware and furniture and different bits, but they all follow the same thing, which is generally like a question or a kind of, a problematic that one's trying to resolve.
One of the things that, obviously I've been sat thinking about your work, but one of the things that sort of immediately jumped out to me across all these things is the way that you frame literally what you're trying to, or the narrative you're trying to get across. So whether that's in the sort away photos with actually leaving the film edges there, or with the digital photographs or sculptures where you're like splicing a photo into many different frames.
That's actually crazy because they're 3D, those, and they're video. So they're like moving image. So then they're actual boxes. So that thing of Sue Tilley, who's like the benefits supervisor, that's 200 kilos. It's enormous.
So wait, let's talk about that in particular. Okay. Right. And we, just for anyone listening who doesn't know the reference, right, it's the highest price for a living painter ever. And it's this massive, as in the painting itself is massive, of this nude. And she was a supervisor, benefit supervisor, Sue Tilley, who her story is much bigger than that, but it was reduced to this. So why did you choose to make, as you just said, this really...
So basically, it's so interesting. So as you say, it's like exactly that. So Lucian Freud was like a portrait painter, and he then met Sue Tilley first, who was the benefit supervisor and gave him his benefits. And she kind of introduced him to a really cool gang of people. She was best friends with Lee Barry and like exactly all that gang of people. So she's super, super cool. I was really interested. So he did a series of portraits of her. Sue was known for like not having like the sort of, how do you say, standardized concepts of like, the kind of heroin chic look of the time, let's say. And she was staged, in these sort of nude positions with her eyes closed and stuff. Exactly. And then, as you say, that painting like sold for a fortune, etc. And I was really interested in, so it goes a little bit further, but I was very interested in sort of reappropriating the kind of male gaze on the body there. And so restaging a video, so she's in the same pose, but it's video. It's her in Lucian Freud's flat, and it's restaged, and so her body's like broken up within different screens. And her eyes are closed for a period of it, so you're with her in her breathing and stuff. And people have a funny relationship to the sculpture where they walk towards it and then suddenly she opens her eyes. And so there's a moment where the judger is being suddenly questioned for the way that they're sort of interacting and judging her body, which is really nice because it's like a moment where there's a little startle and you suddenly, the thoughts that you might have had or not had or whatever are put into question and into the reverse of the gaze. But the other thing that I always found really, really interesting is obviously the whole Freud. I'm really, really into psychoanalysis in terms of my practice, not so much as a subject of it, but as trying to understand it. And obviously Sigmund and Lucian, they have this really interesting link, not only of their names and their sort of bloodline, but also their relationship to the couch. I always thought was such an interesting thing. So obviously the couch in Sigmund Freud's practice is really, really important because it's the kind of the thing that allows you not to be facing the other, and so in some ways to be able to open up, a bit like when you're at the hairdresser or something, you've got the mirror in between you so people confide, like more easily. And the same with the couch. In some ways you're in that relationship of like you're not feeling the judgment so strongly. And very similarly in like Lucian's practice, there's this couch as well that's very predominant. And in restaging the scene, we had to restage the couch and find back the things of the couch. And again, it puts that whole question of like the sitter and the painter or the filmer or whatever, and what is that relationship and how does that exist? What are the boundaries of it? How does it reverse and what story does it tell? And actually then in the feature film that I did, there's a situation of a power dynamic between a young actress and a director actually. And so again, it's the same sort of relationship between who controls the narrative, how does that narrative come out,
but with your
quite interesting.
And I love all that. And I love the idea that you walk up to this thing and she opens her eyes and you're like, oh God, she's looking at me and I was looking at her.
Yeah.
And who is the voyeur here? But then with that, you broke it up into tiny blocks, like you chopped her up into pieces. Why did you do that?
It's funny, like the things like you do where you have so much convictions when you're doing like a piece, and then it's always difficult to exactly like explain it. But I think like there were a couple things that I was very interested in at the time when I was working on that series. First was like this idea of digitization. And so the sculpture, and also very interested in this idea of like video works, but I never was really into, this is like, they were done quite a while ago, like maybe like 8 years ago. And so I guess like, that whole thing is a bit before NFTs, but even NFTs. So anyway, the point is, I don't like the idea of having to look at a screen to look at a video work. So I was thinking like, how do you structure it in terms of as a sculpture in a way that's simple, that you just plug it in, but you get like that kind of understanding of the screen. So it's very much like a piece that's freestanding and sculptural, but broken up into the screens. And it has like very rusty metal, because I always think there's something so interesting about technology that it's always outdated. Like you're always too late with technology, right? That's why that whole thing of, I don't think that technology and equality is something that can really ever come together, because there's always more resources needed and there's always someone who's outdone, because there's always something new. So anyway, but some people obviously are very pro technology, and that's, I'm pro it. It's like complicated. But anyway, so the rustiness of it was that, and that kind of black and white images. And I guess in terms of the breaking up of the body, there's that objectification of the female figure throughout a bunch of time, like ages. And I guess this was very much like a kind of obvious way of showing that, it's like literally breaking up the pieces and offering them up in some ways. But with one piece being cheeky enough to be able to look at you back.
I felt it.
And reclaim you.
But I felt it made it, there is this like deliberate chopping of her body. And in my head, I immediately went, and I don't know why, it's got all the surrealist stuff that shows up in your work time and time again.
but I went to like the nude descending the staircase.
Oh my God, obsessed. Yeah, it's so interesting.
But this idea of this like fractured figure that is kind of in front of itself. And it made the whole thing feel a lot braver, I guess, or saying more than just, it felt like it said more than just the gaze. Like it wasn't just about looking at you, that it actually was about the way the female body is cut and spliced and pulled apart and then put back together by a viewer.
And I think that's really true. And also, it's funny because I was speaking to the friend of mine, a heterosexual guy friend, and he was saying it's so interesting. Like, well, anyway, that was his experience. Like, he felt that men's arousal and women's arousal was slightly different. Like, in terms of a man could focus on a detail of a woman, like a small ankle detail, and abstract the rest, and didn't matter in some ways. Whereas, like, it's true, women tend to be more like, if you see someone, they've got one element that you might not like, potentially it might put you off the whole thing, which I thought was kind of interesting. And I wondered if that had been one of the reasons as well for I guess that portrayal, I guess more traditionally within this historical context. But it's really interesting, obviously, then with Instagram and all that stuff, because that's exactly what it keeps doing. But it's like exploding that, right? And it's exploding then that kind of misappropriation of like the body for commercial use. It's like really complicated, isn't it?
How much do you want your work to be part of an activism or controversial or provocative? Is that like, do you lead with that, or does that just happen naturally? If I was answering the question for you, I'd say that it happens by mistake. That, the sculpture behind you, sure, it's a mass of forms that reference female breasts or breasts generally, but that's not inherently provocative.
Yeah, it's so funny because I guess I'm not quite organized enough like that. I generally tend to be quite instinctive with things, or just deal with stuff that I'm trying to figure out in my own becoming of a human, which I think is like, I'm very confused most of the time. So then I guess I'm just trying to figure out stuff, and the stuff sometimes feels like really far behind, like, because it feels like stuff that hopefully you kind of move beyond. So this I actually, did when I was pregnant, and when your body feels totally alien, and it's like all these different things. It's kind of awe-inspiring. It's actually the original piece. This is actually a cast of the original piece, which is 4 meters. And it feels like so powerful, but then it also feels so not your own. And it feels like so alienating and so bizarre. I remember when my baby was born, I was like, who is this little old Chinese man sucking on my nipple? This is so weird. And like, there's that kind of like crazy relationship. So I don't know. And more recently, I've been completely obsessed with this idea that, we're sort of living in the dystopias of the 60s, 70s, and 80s because our visionaries, like Elon Musk and like all these guys were geeks and grew up on graphic novels and science fiction books, and, have just created the aesthetic and the kind of ideas that were written within that. And actually, I met the guy who created Siri, and I asked him, how did you get the idea? And he said, well, when I was a kid, there was a book about a machine that talked. And so obviously when I was starting building machines, that's what I wanted to do. And then when you look at stuff like driverless cars or whatever, they feel like a very 80s dream. They feel like so old fashioned. And in some ways we could be doing so much better. And so I think like, actually that is something I think would be amazing if the creative community in some way could help build. And I don't mean just visual artists, I mean like science fiction writers and novelists, fashion designers, everything, could help and come together and build like an aesthetic of what it means to live in a positive like utopia, let's say, or at least in a positive way on Earth. Because I think stuff like space travel has a very clear aesthetic and, but Earth living doesn't really. And so there's no real brain drain of all these really smart people that are going to work in like Silicon Valley and all that. We kind of had to inspire these people to like actually come up with an amazing new way that's not resolving problems. It's not about sorting, because that's so boring and like defensive. You know, you want something proactive where you're like building something instead, and you can get everyone excited about it again. And meeting this guy who works for Elon Musk or whatever, he's working on this thing on space, and I was like, do you actually want to go to space? Like, do you want your parents to die in space, or do you want them to die like by the sea, you know, with the, you know, because it's like all that money is going towards something that maybe we don't even want. You know, it's so mad. Anyway, it's so crazy. The allocation of resources of humans is completely mad. And you think of all that money in advertisement just to make us feel shit about ourselves, you know, and you think, God, if you just changed it to, I don't know, for kindness. Do you know? I mean, it's just mad.
Anything.
Billions and billions and billions. I mean, it's just incredible. That's bonkers. But anyway.
So the answer to the question would maybe be yes, that there is this active part in yourself.
I don't know. Hang on. I don't know. It's just more like, I feel it's difficult to live one's life completely not, I don't know. I guess, yeah, I'm just interested in humans. I think just quite interesting. And like, and the way we evolve and how we come to be, how we are, and I don't know. And I guess, you know, it's just, it is interesting. And I guess, yeah, this thing that we really live in imagined structures, you know, that everything is imagined, the lights, you know, your trousers, your pencil. And so in some ways, like that kind of necessity to actively, as a society, remember that imagination is super important. But, you know, at school, it's like considered like the stupid thing, but it's like, there isn't anything else in human society apart from what's imagined by humans, whether it be a bridge or like, you know, a better way to, I don't know, say the word shoot. You know, it's like, it's so interesting.
But I mean, that whole, right, the completely broken value exchange in society where, and I said this out loud yesterday, but I say it all the time. It's like we value our sports stars, the guys that sit on the bench, more than most artists. And that doesn't make any sense. Why? Because is it easier to spectate what they do? And so we can put it in a box? Or is it because art's just sat as an aside for so long, right? It's a thing that's in a gallery away, and it's we don't live with art enough. And so one of the things, like I walked in here and was like, oh my God, it's, you know, you live and breathe this. There is no separation.
But, you know, it's so crazy because I'm doing this collaboration, very sweet, with the Lewis FC, who are my local football team. And they're really, really amazing, like football team. And they're 100% community owned. So you get 50 quid and you can become an owner. And then the first to have equal pay and equal training for female and male players. And you know, Lewis is really small, and their female team was in the second division, and they've just been relegated because they are needing some funds. And so that's why I've done their kit and put an eye and stuff. And actually Kate came this morning, Nash, to do a song. We're doing a little song, you know, that can be performed for the gig, and it's launching their campaign or whatever. But that's super sweet because they're really enacting like the kind of change that they want to see within like the football realm, where also, you know, obviously they try and have not like loads of hatred and people hitting each other in the stadium and stuff, but like, you know, they're just really amazing, like community thing. And Kate's really into that whole community idea, you know, and like, you know, how she's very much like community can save democracy, you know, and it is true. Like the one thing you can do to potentially get out of like the kind of consumerist totalitarianism, which is like brainwashing us, is just joining a club or like going to your local wherever, you know, and just talking to people.
Yeah.
It's so crazy. It's like, because we're not supposed to talk to anyone outside of our algorithm, you know, so just like that feels like an actual something you can do is just speak to anyone outside your algorithm and you can change the world. It's amazing. It's just like, yeah, spanner in the system. But anyway.
One of the things too that has always, or is shocking about you is that you're this like light giving, hopeful character.
Like,
but then there's darkness in the work. And so I think you probably like, you put it all there.
I'm like,
Let's talk about the films for a second. They are dark.
Yes.
They are dark.
Not all, well, no, actually, the one I'm working on now is dark as well, but not more in terms of the political context of it is dark.
But like the Silent Man, right? Before 2 minutes of that, you sit there like, no, please don't do it. Please.
Oh my God.
Chops her finger off.
Yes, it's true. I forgot about that.
And then a penis.
Oh my God.
Like flung my feet in it too. I mean, it is like awkward.
That was so funny. I mean, yeah, it was quite mad. I still kind of amazing that Cillian Murphy agreed to be the sex doll in it, which is so funny because obviously now, anyway, so he's amazing. Like, talk about like someone who's very, has got a lot of integrity with their practice. It's amazing. Yeah, I guess the narratives do have that, but I guess it was also a bit funny. But that was based on the idea, like I just read somewhere that Oskar Kokoschka, you know, that artist, he basically used to go out with Alma Mahler, who, you know, then went out with Gustav Mahler. That's where she got her name, you know, the composer. Anyway, whatever, this girl, loads of people were in love with her at that time. And so little Oskar Kokoschka was very in love with her. And she was like, basically, I think, trying to get rid of him and told him to go join the front. So he went and joined the front in the festival. When he got back, she was married to someone else. And the guy was devastated, understandably. And he'd gone through this horror and then she'd gone. And then, so he made a doll in her image. And the doll was so horrendous. It was like, you know, basically he wanted it soft. So it was like, obviously before the days of like, you know, good rubber and stuff like that. So it was in feathers. It's like a big feathery doll. And he made these, I think for me, his paintings of this doll. And he lived for a year with the doll and then finally destroyed the doll. And so basically it was kind of a gender flip version of that, where this girl, Sophie Kennedy Clarke, orders a doll in the likeness of her ex-boyfriend, who was Cillian Murphy, and she orders it. And we ordered an actual sex doll, and the sex doll arrived, and it weighs a ton. So I was thinking, you're a single woman, you're like ordering a sex doll. I mean, it was hilarious, because obviously even we made it in there, so you can't even lift it up the bloody stairs, right? It weighs like 50 kilos, get alone maneuvering the thing around. It was insane.
That shot, the door opens.
The door opens. Oh my God, it's so funny. Anyway, it was just hilarious, the whole thing. And I was 8 months pregnant when I shot that. It was so funny. Yeah.
It's not funny to watch, though.
No, it's not funny to watch.
It's hard.
True.
It's hard to watch.
Yeah, and before that, I did this thing. Yeah, it was this little animation. And then the feature, I guess, is also, you know, more on the sort of horror scope.
Psychological.
Yeah.
Thriller, no?
Yeah, exactly. It's a kind of gothic, fairy tale. But it was produced by, or exec produced by Dario Argento, who's like a big horror director. And then
someone called it otherworldly feminist vengeance.
Yes, it is it's kind of like this idea. Yeah, it's a woman who sort of gets her comeuppance, but in her 70s. And I was quite keen to have actually it was really difficult to do at that point, to get, you know, a lead that was, you know, assassination, because basically the system is so screwed up, you know, for sales of films and stuff. But our lead was amazing. Alice Krieger and Malcolm McDowell and Rupert Everett and Kota Eberhardt. And so it was crazy, but it has a lot of the themes that are in my other practice. You know, my practice as an artist, let's say, you know, a lot of the muscle memory that's carried through the earth and through our DNA, the way the infinitely small and the sort of infinitely big mirror each other, and you know, again, like these notions of narratives and how we reclaim in some ways the stuff that hurt us. And I guess it also links to, there's a mastectomy in it, which is kind of the trigger point to the character. And also this kind of notion of, I guess, you know, turning the stories around, like in some ways reclaiming something that might have hurt you and using it what makes you stronger. So in her sense, there's this mental wound, but also this physical thing of the mastectomy and her kind of then becoming this sort of Amazon warrior, you know, which is kind of fun.
And what about the uterus, right? I mean, we're sat in your house.
Oh my God.
And it's like either Philip's alter ego,
yes,
the lobster, or it feels like it's your alter ego.
Yes.
The uterus.
So basically there's like 4 symbols in the house: the eye and the uterus, which are my ones, and then Philip's like lobster and cactus. And then, and so I guess the uterus, I think, is like such an interesting like symbol, first of all, because it looks so much like the Christian cross. And I really think like a lot of the, you know, monotheistic symbols plastered themselves on pre-patriarchal hierarchies and systems. So I think it's always a nice thing to act as this reminder, you know, that everything could be different. Like in some ways, like you can never trust anything because we could rethink everything in a different way. Also, we all come from a womb, and that's insane. Even Donald Trump was squeezed into one day. I mean, that kind of boggles your mind. The surrealism of that is just mental. And then the eye, which is on the table and on the vase and on loads of different things, is basically, I just really think, I don't know, I love the eye. And I think it's interesting as that kind of connector between the inner world and the outer world. And I love all these kind of amazing, you know, tales that or legends that humans come from the tears of God, or, you know, if it's a symbol of consciousness, it's a symbol of possibility and connection and dreams and an alternative, you know, futures and stuff. So I guess in the freeze thing at Fitzrovia, it was a really big, I don't know if it's a chapel. Yeah, exactly. It was so beautiful, that chapel. I love it. There's this amazing, this massive eye in this amazing chapel. And yeah, it was a kind of, in my mind, it was a sort of portal through, like a kind of Alice in Wonderland portal through which you can kind of enter the possibility of different worlds. You know, I love fairy tales so much.
If I can do this, I want to finish at the beginning.
Oh my God, yeah.
As in, why do you do all this? What drives you? What keeps you going? And why did you start in the first place? If you could, like, what's the thing?
Well, I probably wouldn't be able to do anything else. I don't know, like, and you know, I don't know. I think I need to work through things. I'm always hovering on the verge of madness. I think there's like just that tiny thread that, you know, connects one to sort of to reality. You know, I feel sometimes like a kite, and I guess, yeah, feeding fiction and understanding within my understanding of reality helps probably me survive in some weird way, I guess. But I haven't really thought of it like that. But I guess something like that.
And it helps the rest of us, right? Like navigate and figure stuff out.
Confusion out, everyone's like, oh my God, let's go on.
No, but it's good. It's right. It's like in all your work. It'll stop and think. It's not decorative. It's why is it there? And, you know, why are there a pile of breasts behind you?
It's so funny because then you forget that stuff like breasts are so taboo. So in China, they had to erase the something where I was like, oh, what happened to the piece? And they were like, we photoshopped it out of the picture. I was like, what? And then that is so crazy. Yeah, so it's very interesting, like the different taboos and stuff. It's so weird. But I've got to tell you this one thing because I think you'll like this, that fairy tales, there's this amazing woman called Marina Warner, who you probably know. And she would be a good person to interview for the theoretical stuff. But anyway, I'm obsessed with fairy tales and I work a lot with fairy tales. And they're very dark, obviously, but they're also full of light and full of, you know, otherworldliness. And she describes fairy tales as stories in code that were transmitted from women to women. Yeah. And I think it's so interesting because there is that thing of the code and the archetypes and the secret meanings of things. And I think women are slightly more attuned to it because I guess for centuries they weren't allowed to speak. So that's why, like, I don't know if you've ever done this, it's so interesting if you're having like a meal and there's like one conversation and then another layer of conversation which is completely different. And then if you have kids at a table, they have their own also dynamics that are going on. But it's just so fascinating. Yeah.
So is there one piece of art?
Budgets would be no. I mean, so many.
What would you buy?
I went to the Barbara Kruger show in New York and I was blown away. I would have definitely loved to have all of her work. I thought it was incredible. I mean, so many. If I could get anything, I'd love to get Leonora Carrington. She's so incredible and amazing. And probably squeeze a thing where you can just walk from your bathroom into like one of those incredible prehistoric caves and see those incredible hands pressed, which apparently with the hands of women, they're most likely, which I always think were amazing because obviously there's that whole thing of like anonymous artists.
We're women.
We're all women. Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it? So interesting, that whole history of like how women got pushed And then reclaimed, I think probably those, walking into the Let's Go cave from your bathroom.
And here.
And he meditate on the existence of the world. It began so not long ago.
No.
And we're already giving it all up for fools. Yeah. But it's a shame.
I think I'm only conscious of time, so I'm going to let you go, and I don't want to.
Oh my God, so fun.
It's going to be like the Thrown Away series for me, where I'll walk away and be like, I should have asked that.
Oh my God. Like, come around for tea or whatever. It would be so nice, and come around with the kids. It's so sweet.
That's for you. That's for you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh my God, this is so fun. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Scene Podcast. If you liked what you heard, I'd love it if you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to connect with us between episodes, follow us on Instagram at WatchSceneArt. I'm Carrie Scott, and I'll see you next time. Get it?